Well, I guess Jade. Okay, well, while we're waiting, and just to get us back into it, someone did want to know: would Jesus have been alt-right? Let's get a response from both of you.
Well, I think the difficulty in that question is the diversity of the alt-right. I don't read Jesus as being very diverse. In fact, he's not a cultural relativist at all. He's very critical of different cultures and societies. He often makes jokes about degenerate societies and cities. So he's not a moral and cultural relativist. So in that regard, I don't think he could fit into any scheme or system that denies moral absolutes. So it really depends on what we mean by alt-right. So that would be my response.
And Richard?
Well, Odin would be alt-right on a deeper sense, but yeah, I think Jesus might have been alt-right in the sense that he was a rebel and he was true to himself, obviously willing to die for an ideal. And he might actually recognize the alt-right as the one group, at least in the United States and Western Europe, is the one group that is really genuinely oppressed. And I think he actually might have a great deal of sympathy for us. But in terms of the ultimate gods that we want, I think they would have to be a Jesus in a form like Apollo or so on. We can't just have a rebellious God or a God on a cross, a dying God as our savior. I think we ultimately need a ruling God.
Okay. One important point there, and this is something very important that distinguishes Orthodox Christianity from the West, and that is that in the Western tradition, medieval Latin Catholicism, which gives birth to the Protestant reaction, you have this overemphasis on Christ crucified. You have almost a loss of the notion of the idea of Christ as the recapitulation of everything that Adam lost, the sort of cosmic Christ that we see very prominent in Eastern churches, and the idea of the Pantocrator. So the idea that Christ's resurrection is actually the trampling down of death is the highest liturgical ceremony of Orthodoxy. And so actually Orthodoxy is focused on the idea of man's deification or theosis. This is also something downplayed in Western Christianity. So I think that actually maybe what Richard is looking for in the Übermensch, or the idea of a man against time, time, is actually found in the idea that we are participating in a real deification. This is what Peter talks about in his epistle, partaking of the divine nature. On what you explain in this long idea of the reptilian brain and the rise of morality, and you would say that we have a kind of duty, maybe, I think, in some sense, to the white race. Is it possible, on your perspective, that could evolve to not be true in the future?
Yes and no. I mean, theoretically, yes, it could evolve. We could, through terrible practices, we could just breed an entire planet of raceless, historyless, loveless sociopaths, or just the absolute silly, guilt-ridden SJWs. Yes, theoretically, we could do that. But I think practically speaking, I don't think we could do that. Because as I've stated before, love of a people is evolutionarily advantageous. People who can work as a group, who can have a sense of themselves, a sense of being on a team, are going to win. And so, practically speaking, no. I think a planet of individuals could never exist. And in that sense of cohesion, religion certainly plays a huge part.
Okay, if we rely on the idea that evolutionary biology is the explanation for morals and these kinds of things, I mean, we see a lot of things in nature that aren't necessarily moral. I mean, we see predatory behavior. We see the weak being trampled by the strong. And you said earlier that if we have a totally psychopathic society, it doesn't seem to cohere. I would argue that we actually do see the rise of psychopathy in certain oligarchic families, with certain rival religious groups or something like that, and they will actually degrade cultures. They will degrade societies through social engineering. We're watching this now with the Fortune 100 promoting social justice warriors and trannies everywhere. And so my criticism again is that if we believe that this is all merely evolutionary process, then we don't really have a basis to oppose it, because whatever happens is just evolutionary process. It's just the phenomena happening. It's just shit happening. It's just the tragedy of life. I mean, why fight for the people? Why fight for your existence?
That's not quite what I'm saying. You're raising some very interesting points, and I think in terms of this, global elite and so on being sociopathic and so on, yes, I think that's an accurate description. But you're leaving will out of it in the sense that we, as humans, we have reached a evolutionary singularity. I agree. As I've stated, morality is advantageous, no question. But the fact is, we don't want a world like that, and we are going to have to take responsibility. And that doesn't necessarily mean rationalizing a theology or so on. It means willing it, and it means forcing it to happen at some point. And we can come up with a rational justification for it afterwards. And I'll speak about this in somewhat abstract terms, but I think everyone can recognize what I'm saying. But yeah, and the other thing that I've said, I don't want to just accept the world as it is. There's no question. I'm not just a evolutionary thinker who says, "Oh, this is where we are right now. This is just the outcome of amoral, evolution. This is where we are." No, I want a different world, and there certainly needs to be will in it. We need to take responsibility for the world that we want, and the world will make sense when we force it to make sense.
I mean, would that require means like maybe at one point we should promote like pedophilia in another culture? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, no, I mean,
I get what you're saying, but I mean, I'm not that awful. I mean,
no, I'm not saying you are doing that or believe that. I'm saying that it seems like that kind of a position, if we don't believe that there are moral absolutes.
I think there are certain people, tribes, if you will, that actually seek to promote absolute degeneracy in rival bands. That's and we as white people, we don't do that because it's just sick. I don't want to like promote total absolute degeneracy among the Han Chinese. I know you weren't saying that, but the fact is, in order to face off against these people who do promote degeneracy, we might have to call upon a certain fighting spirit. We might have to become a monster in a way in order to kill this monster. And that is, again, a tragedy of our existence, in the sense that civilized, ordered societies are ultimately based on violence. They're ultimately based on someone who's willing to establish an order. And on top of that, violent foundation, there can be beauty and goodness and morality. But we might have to take responsibility for that and recognize the situation what we're in.
Right, but I guess I'm still just not understanding how, if we think that there's not moral absolutes, if we adopt that position and we believe in this kind of grand mythology that evolutionary biology explains all of this, why we are beholden to any of these things. I mean, ultimately it might be something like, well, we should survive as a people. We need to survive, but why? There's not really any reason to prefer survival to suicide. It's really just
I mean, I think we actually both agree on this, that so much of modern Christianities are debased. They aren't supporting a civilization in the way that they could or have. But if we can create a positive Christianity, in the sense that someone says the white race must survive in order for this universal truth to remain in the world, that we are the bearers of this greatness, then I would certainly support this religion. But I'm saying from an analytic perspective, again, I guess you could call me a kind of nihilist in the sense I'm not an active nihilist or a passive nihilist, but I am speaking a tragic and dark truth, which is that for the world to make sense, for the world to be beautiful, we might have to force it to be that way. And if there is a motivating illusion that for the white race to survive, the white race must survive to maintain the mission of Christ and the greatness of the church. If that is a motivating illusion, then I would support it.
All right, Jay, do you have a response for that?
I've got a lot of other notes and stuff, but not on that specific point. No.
All right, why don't we move on? There were some other things that Richard said. I know you were kind of looking up that you wanted to respond to.
There's a bizarre kind of reliance on Nietzsche, who was very, very critical of science, and especially scientism. Yeah. And I think we've seen in many cases science being politicized. I don't know if you would agree with the idea of big science, or the idea that science is in many senses controlled, especially at the university level, to not allow for things like discussion of race. I mean, that's
sure, obviously, yeah.
So why do you not, since you have a lot of skepticism for things like religion, why is there not a skepticism for something like grand narratives in terms of evolutionary biology?
I'm skeptical of that too. I agree that there are science. I mean, look, just because I'm skeptical of science doesn't mean that I think that science can't offer us a vision into the truth and a vision of ourselves. Right. No, I agree with what you were talking about in terms of big science. I also agree with a kind of Kuhnian understanding of the paradigms of science, in the sense that it's not so much that science doesn't just accumulate data in this linear progression towards the truth, that it actually goes and twists and turns. And so there are paradigms or revolutions, you could say, in the science, where after Copernicus, science was on a totally different footing. After Darwin, there was a new paradigm. There's going to be another paradigm after Darwin. Newton actually created a paradigm that is arguably superseded by the Einsteinian paradigm, but that doesn't mean that Newton wasn't giving us this profound glimpse at the truth. Again, I think that, we can only grasp truth through a perspective. We can only glimpse it here and there. And even though I am skeptical of science, and I'm just saying this, that doesn't mean that it's invaluable or that it doesn't have something to offer us.
Well, I guess what I was asking was specifically about the evolutionary model as an explanation for morals and religion. That seems to be fundamental to your thesis and why you have the worldview that you do. And I'm asking if there is this skepticism for a lot of things, especially as a person alt-right who's had to deal with establishment media. Other people have had to deal with establishment academia and had to leave because of not being PC, that we start to see that there's a kind of orthodoxy for the dark side, so to speak, in all of these spheres of life in a way.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
So is it
Are you skeptical of morality? Like the way that I would look at morality as well, and even Christian morality, particularly Judaic Christian morality, as also being a kind of weapon. I mean, one of the insights of the genealogy of morals, which is maybe even Nietzsche's greatest work, it's definitely a good starting point for anyone interested in this, is that there is this earlier conception of good and bad. And bad is effectively weak. Bad is sick. Bad is degenerate. Bad is gross. Good means that it brings us power. There's and don't think of that in some awful way of Machiavellian way. Think of in the sense of like the family is good. Because this is who we are. This is how we survive. Being powerful, generating. This is good, and that there was the major revolution of Judaism was to flip that on their masters, people who dominated them. As you say, Romans were able to crush the Jews, crush their temples, literally and figuratively. They were the ruling caste over these people. We no longer are. And this was, in Nietzsche's view, a moral revolution in the sense that Jews got it in the heads of their masters that actually being good is being meek, being good is being weak, being good is being an impoverished nothing, and actually being bad, that's being strong, being evil is being strong. And so that morality itself is will to power. Morality can be used as a weapon. And so much of what is directed against the identitarian idea or nationalism or so on is moral. I would say before all of these things that we face, like getting deplatformed or PC or whatever, we face it on the moral plane first. So it's not just that Richard Spencer is factually inaccurate or Richard Spencer is dumb. It's Richard Spencer is evil. Richard Spencer, it's even if he's right, he's still evil. And so morality in this way can be a weapon used against us. And I think so many of the fundamental reasons why white people aren't dominating the entire planet, as we certainly can, is because of this black cloud that has been hanging over us, this notion that our history is bad, that when we were in power, that was just awful and immoral and so on. And so really, we need to be skeptical of morality. We need to have a consciousness of morality and to start reforming a morality willfully that is life affirming and that is race affirming.
From First Things, written in September 17, Christianities for Cucks by a guy named Matthew Schmitz. That's what it was referring to.
Yeah.
But Richard, to bring it back to what Jay was saying earlier, I think a lot of people who are agnostic, myself, I've used the term culturally Christian, as you have. One of the problems that I've had with modern Christianity is how it is manifested in the church, or the church is. You can look at the institutions of the church and see there are a lot of problems with these institutions. They have failed, most notably the Catholic Church has failed on a grand scale to stop any sort of social decay in the West. Now, at the same time, I think what Jay is saying does have some merit, that there throughout history, the churches have been a positive force and a civilization forming force. So, Richard, to you, how do we reconcile these two things? And then Jay will let you jump in and respond there as well.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll answer this question. There was something I wanted to say about what Jay was saying, but I'll go back to that later. I agree that the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church have been civilizing forces. And both of which derive from the ultimate source of our civilization, which is Rome, and the structure that the Roman Empire ultimately created for us. I mean, we are a race because of the Roman Empire. I think not that we aren't a race biologically speaking, but I think it would be wrong for us to underestimate that political structure that created who we are. So and there's also no question that the Catholic Church has been, and then the Orthodox Church has been attached to aristocracy. It has been a social ordering function. It serves such a function. I think what we find today, though, is a kind of primitive Christianity. You could kind of say that it's becoming what it was, and you could even go a little bit further and say that it's actually a heresy on one level, but it might actually be getting at some essential factor to the early church. If there is a trend in Christianity today, the high churches, like the Episcopalian Church and the Catholic Church, have become swipple liberals and just kind of silly. I still actually have a lot of fondness for the Episcopalian Church. I have good memories of being an Episcopalian. I went to a few of those holy roller churches and was terrified by rocking out to Jesus and all that kind of stuff. Whereas my church, we played Bach and Handel during holy days, and there was still, even in this late stage, there was still a civilizing element to it. But I would say the other trend on the low church has been towards a absolute heresy, which is get rich quick. Jesus is going to help me pay my mortgage. Jesus wants you to live in total victory, as Joel Osteen says, and so on. But there's another trend, and that is also a kind of general left-wing trend. And that is towards this, I'm a Christ follower. I don't even really care about the Bible or the literal interpretation of the Bible as much as I care about this essential message of the church, which is that we all, as Christians, we are all one. That we are a kind of believing nation, that there is there is great virtue in effectively egalitarianism and so on. You could say asceticism, but it's not really quite asceticism. It's not a monastery. It's more of a we need to give over ourselves, give over our power to all people around the world. These are the general trends. Now, the one major exception to this actually is Orthodoxy. If there is one church that I don't really have a beef with, it is the Orthodox Church. So again, this is where I'm giving a lot of ground to Jay here. I do think that it fulfills its mission in a truer way than any other church today. But one has to ask, when one looks at this as a phenomenon, one has to ask, why is this? Why are all of these churches, from Catholics to evangelicals to high church Protestants to midline Protestants, why are they all headed in the same direction? Why are they all creating this effectively a liberal theology? It's almost like liberalism with God. And you see this. I've even seen this out where I am now in Montana. Of how do you be a real Christian? Well, you got to go to Africa, do all this kind of stuff. Why is this all headed in the same direction? And the fact is, I do think that there is a deep egalitarian message. There's certainly a world-denying message at the heart of Christianity and the early church. But there is a deep egalitarian message which is embedded in it. Now, this has there's certain virtues to that. This is actually, I think, this quest for universalism, to bring morality just out of the in-group, but towards a broader scale. I think there's been many great things about that. I think that speaks to us who we are as European-derived peoples. But I think that this primitive Christianity that we're seeing today, this Christianity devoid of the Bible, devoid of liturgy, even devoid of tradition, certainly, this mere Christianity that is basic, has embedded within it some things that are deeply problematic. I believe that liberalism is a Christian heresy. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not saying that liberalism is Christianity. It is a heresy, but heresies come from somewhere. They are poor versions of something else. So I've always been highly skeptical of a couple of things that I've heard from conservatives over my career. That first off, the one thing standing in the way of liberalism is Christianity. I simply don't believe that. I believe that the deeper Christian message has given itself over into liberalism. And the other thing that I've always that's always bothered me with conservative Christians, that they say that liberals are moral relativists, that they have no morality, they're just anything goes and all that. That might be true in the sexual sphere, but in the moral sphere, it's actually not true at all. The left are moral fanatics. They engage in witch hunts. They have a sense of good and evil that is puritanical, that cannot be questioned. They are driven by a kind of possession, a moral force. So again, I brought up a number of different topics that we can discuss. But I don't believe that the modern world that we live in today is in its way a Christian or anti-Christian. I think it is a Christian heresy. Okay. And we actually have to look back to Judaism ultimately, but Christianity as well, to actually understand the morality of the contemporary world.
Okay, Jay, there's obviously a lot there. You can go and choose whatever avenue.
Right. Before I start unpacking that, before I unpack that, I have to ask Richard if this psyop cat behind me that keeps staring at me. This cat, is it? Or do you do taxidermy on the side? Is it? What is this?
I think that's, you mean right there or that?
Yeah, there's like this ominous cat.
That's a like, bear. It's a bronze bear. But yes, it is a psyop. Just to let you know.
Okay, so yeah, that.